Get out the insurance cards, get out the copays. The office is open, my friends. Brought to you by drroto.com.
We're back. It is March Madness. It is a day that ends in Y, which means that it is time for the One and Done show. I am Eric Romoff. You can catch me on Twitter at FantasyNav, and he is the captain now, the captain of our ship, Mr. Mike Holland. Mike, how's it going tonight?
It is good. I'm like a kid on Christmas Eve. I'm so excited. Obviously, you got all day basketball watching. Hopefully we can pair that up with some winnings. First day of the Mania seat. So we'll see how it goes. I'm excited.
Yeah, you sent a tweet out earlier tonight that put it perfectly. This is the Super Bowl for college basketball over on DraftKings, really on any platform that you're playing for. We are seeing the game selection increase. We are seeing the contest size increase. We're seeing these payouts increase, right? This is very much so the start of the largest slates of the year. If you haven't already, start cooking up whatever weak-ass excuse you have to get out of work tomorrow and get ready to plug in. But with this being the largest slate of the year that we've seen so far, with some of the largest purses out there, how does the strategy change as you're looking at a 16-game slate, as you're looking at these larger fields, right? We're usually in that kind of 10 to 12 range. So kind of at the macro level, how do these larger slates impact the strategy?
Yeah, I mean, there's 16 games, right? So there's a lot of different ways to go. A lot of nice totals, a lot of totals kind of in that mid-tier range. And there's some yucky games that are in here, but you can find a couple of plays in there that you can probably make work. Probably not going to have too much exposure to maybe 3 to 4 games. Typically, if you're playing multiple lineups, you're going to want to get exposure to a lot of the top games that are out there. If you're playing single entries, it's going to be a little bit tougher. I'm trying to decide what to do. You're going to have to take stands, obviously, on the guys at the very top. Are you going to play a Sheboy? Are you going to play a Murray? What's your stand on that? Obviously, if you're mass multi-entering like I'm doing tomorrow, I'm going to kind of mix it up and play all different types of styles, game stack in different ways. If you're playing large field, obviously it's good. I think we have like 7,800 people in the $15, so it's not necessarily a bad idea to be a little different, to take some gambles on stars that might not be in the best spots. It's kind of what you're looking for. So if you're playing a smaller field, I'm in the 222 tomorrow. I'm probably not taking as many crazy chances. So it really just depends on what type of tournament you're playing, how many people are in it. As we said all year, there's just different ways to attack slates.
Yeah, kind of sticking to some of the basics, right? Like, not quite dance with the guys who got you there, but ultimately a lot of these strategies, these approaches reign true, right? The larger the field of your game, the more creative you're going to have to get in your build. The smaller, the more you're going to covet someone who's consistent and has a solid floor. So remember those principles, right? It feels very much so like we're here in these big contests, we're here in the Super Bowl, and we got to kind of mix it up, and that's not necessarily the case. So keep that in mind. I guess drilling down a little bit, Mike, is there anything in particular about the games that are on the board, about some of the players that are available that you like on this slate relative to others?
Oh, man, you went like straight Matrix style. I don't know if it's me or you with the connection, but I can see you now. So what was the question again?
I was asking which games, which players you like on this slate.
Yeah. I think we'll talk about a few of these here. Obviously, we've been talking all week about South Dakota State and Providence. Definitely almost 150-point total. Going to get some exposure to that, as well as Iowa, Richmond. Some of these mid-tier games that I'm looking at, man, San Francisco and Murray State's interesting. It's these ones that could potentially you can overtime in or go over. That should be a fun matchup, one that I'm really looking forward to watching. Obviously, you got the top dog here with North Carolina Marquette. That game is going to be super fast, a ton of three-pointers, fantasy points just all over the place. And then you've got your top seeds, right? You've got your teams that, are probably going to win by 20, 30 points. You're 1 and your 2 seeds here. So it's, how do you attack those? What you're probably going to want pieces of those because a lot of those teams are, implied totals are 75, 80, 85 points. So, I think overall it's just how many lineups are you going to play? Which games do you like the most? We're going to break down a few of these here and hopefully take down a big one.
So we'll dive right into the games that we want to break down. You actually mentioned this one by name. We've got the 8-9 matchup, the number 8 seed Marquette against the number 9 seed North Carolina. Carrying the biggest total on the board, 152.5 is the over-under line. Why don't you kick us off with the Marquette side and let us know what's good on the Golden Eagles?
Yeah, so for Marquette, it's Shaka Smart, loves to play fast. They're 75th in three-point shooting, 35%. The problem is they're pretty poor on the glass. So it's definitely going to be an interesting matchup for them. From a betting perspective, I actually like the, taking the points here with North Carolina. But overall for Marquette, it's really been kind of a two-man show here. It's been Justin Lewis and Daryl Morcell. We talked about Lewis earlier this week. Just a stud, man. 29% shot rate. Could do some rebounding here, get you a block or steal here. Now, UNC is tough inside, but it looks like obviously Manic's probably going to be matched up against him. I don't see Baycott really guarding Justin Lewis here. He's 8,600. That price is probably going to scare some people away, even in a high total, because now you're talking about up there with the upper echelon guys. When you're talking you're not too far away from like TJD and Roddy and some of these other guys that you don't want to play, like Holmgren's kind of right in that area. So, Timmy is right in that area. So, don't expect him to be super popular. We've talked about that kind of all year. But man, it's just been so good this year. So, could definitely see him putting a 40-point spot here, especially if we get the up and down game we're expecting. So he's someone I'm looking to get not crazy exposure to, but I'll have him in pretty decent majority of lineups, probably 20%.
Yeah, here we are yet again, right? Justin Lewis is in that kind of mid 8K range, and he is going to be grossly overlooked, right? I wouldn't be surprised, especially with 16 games on the board, to see him in that kind of 5% or below range, which is a spot that we've been attacking all year. You mentioned Morcell as another interesting option for the Golden Eagles. Any other pivots that we should consider? Any other guys that you would maybe play alongside a Justin Lewis or a Morcell?
Yeah, so I don't necessarily like playing Lewis and Morcell together, but I don't mind the fact of putting Lewis with someone like Tyler Kolek in this game is super interesting. He's not the most fun roster out here. He's got a 16% shot share. It's not great, but he's got a 33% assist rate. He's got some steal upside here. For a low-owned game stacking option, he's definitely pretty solid here at 6,200. That price tag is going to scare a lot of people off. Can you get a 30-piece here? Yeah, definitely you could. For expecting that if this game goes over, he definitely has that chance with the steal and assist upside. So another guy that I'm also looking at, Greg Elliott, and this is for large field. He's 4K. Man, the guy can shoot, can really shoot the ball. So in a game where you're going to need to score a ton of points to beat North Carolina, I expect him to get pretty decent minutes, between 20 to 25 minutes. And he doesn't do much else. So if he's not making his three, you can kind of kiss that lineup goodbye. But in some of the $15, some of the larger fields that I'm going to be playing, I'll take a shot or two here as a pairing with Justin Lewis.
Yeah, and to your point on Elliott, right? Like we've been talking about this all year long, right? This is one of the charters of our strategy, specifically looking at these value options that are very effective from long range, right? You get that bonus for those 3 points made. If your guy is 3.5, 4K, the path to them getting to 4, 5, 6S is incredibly more clear if their primary weapon is that 3-point shot that gets the bonus payout. So definitely like the Greg Elliott call for a good bit of value and someone that can bring a good return. Moving over to the North Carolina side, speaking of teams that are effective at chucking it from three, we have been very much so riding these Tar Heels all season long. I think I know the player that you're going to start with, but why don't you go ahead and confirm that before we go much further?
Yeah, I was waiting for the price to come out. If he was under 12,000, he's going to make a ton of my lineups, and of course, nowhere. But Baycott here, 9,500. This is an absolute smash spot. Marquette cannot defend bigs. I mean, what can we say? Like, we were playing Kalkbrenner against these guys from Creighton. I mean, him and Hawkins smashed them both. It's a debate on how many bigs are you going to play against them, right? So they're a terrible rebounding team. They don't really do much as far as being able to stop someone down low 2-point percentage wise. So, and Baycott just in an absolute great spot here, 45% combined rebounding rate, can even give you some assists. He's a 10% assist rate, a 6% block rate. I don't really know how I'm going to fade him on my line. It's not going to be fun, right? But it's obviously tournament setting, and anything can happen, right? If he gets into in foul trouble, Justin Lewis or Morcell attacking the basket, get him 1 or 2 fouls. I mean, and you're that much farther ahead of the field if he's sitting on the bench at 9,500, right? But for me, I'm just going to have a lot of exposure to him. I've rode him all year this year. I'm not going to stop now, especially in a spot that just profiles. It's probably the best spot of anyone in this entire first slated games here. I mean, he's only been under 34 fantasy points in 3 of the last 15 games, and there's 50 fantasy point upside. So for me, it's just kind of a no-brainer. But obviously, I'm going to have a little bit of a limitation to him. So that's how I'm looking to attack him.
Yeah, I think the point that persists there is, really kind of zooming out and looking at your overall exposure and your overall builds, right? Baycott is in the most smashy of smash spots. It is a spot that we've been targeting all year, but it doesn't mean that this person should be in 100% of your builds, right? You need to find ways to, cover your outs, to, cover the other side of the coin if it lands up with the tails up. So something to keep in mind. Another thing that I wanted to double click on, you mentioned when you were talking about Baycott, the question is, how many bigs are you going to play against Marquette? Is there another big for the Tar Heels that you're potentially going to roll out alongside him? Or are you looking maybe on the guard side?
I think you are. You love the 2 big attack whenever teams can't guard the opposing bigs. And it's worked, man. It's worked. Seriously, I mean, Brady Manick, 7,700. They complement each other well, right? Manick can really shoot it from deep. 39% on the year. Pretty decent shot share at 25%. He's going to come in a lot lower, and even especially in a game stack with Baycott, you're going to get that duo. Is it going to be a lower owned duo here that can put up a ton of fantasy points? So I definitely don't mind putting them both together. I'm probably going to leave a lot of that to you. I actually prefer someone like RJ Davis, get some guard exposure in there. For me, it's Love and Davis, man. It's like how to play them. I usually like to play Baycott with one of the two. It's been hit or miss all year for me. It seems like when I have one of the guys, the other one goes off. Love is 7,600, right? So Davis is definitely going to be more popular at 6,700. They can both shoot from deep, right? They both have steal upside. They both have some assist upside. So, with that price savings when you're paying 9,500, I don't mind it. But I'm also looking at pairing Manick with Davis. I'm also looking at pairing Love with Manick, Love with Baycott, and I'll have a little bit of Baycott with Manick. So definitely these 4 guys are the primary targets here for a team that's supposed to score a ton of points here.
So it looks like at minimum, you're targeting 2 Tar Heels and you're generally kind of rotating your exposures to cover all your bases. On the Marquette side, right, if we're looking at a 2-way on the North Carolina side, how many guys are you trying to fit in for Marquette? How many guys from this game in particular do you want to have in most of your builds?
Yeah, so I'm really looking at the 2x1 strategy, right? Using Lewis with 2 of the guys on the other side. In large field tournaments, I'm going to go up to as many as a 3x2. I don't mind playing Manick, Baycott, and Davis with someone like Lewis and Elliott. At the game goes to 180, 190. We had that big slate when UNC played North Carolina State. I think it was like 180 points were scored. And it was just fantasy goodness for like 7 players in that game. I think one of our guys, Corey, won 2,500 that day. So definitely something that I'm looking at. But I mean, obviously, I'm going to have some one-offs and maybe some 1x1s as I continue to build. Who knows how many lineups I'm going to end up with tomorrow. I'm just too excited. But if you're playing, single entry, it's always a good idea to maybe try to get a 2x1 here. It's going to be a very popular game, but fading this game is pretty scary.
It certainly is. We will roll on to another game that can get pretty scary, and it's not just because there are spiders. We got the number 12 seed Richmond Spiders, 10.5-point underdogs to the number 5 seed Iowa Hawkeyes. The only other game on the board that is north of 150 total. So definitely has the makings for some fireworks. Kind of interesting matchups in terms of where these teams are weak and strong. Why don't you kick us off with the underdogs and talk a little bit about the Spiders?
Yeah, for sure. Man, this game is just I'm having trouble figuring out what to exactly do in this game. When you look at Richmond, right, 192nd in tempo, they have the 69th offensive efficiency and they're 9th in turnover percentage, so they don't really, give up the ball here. So when you look at it, you're getting a pace-up spot with Iowa being 52nd in tempo, which is why the implied totals are pretty high here. Ken Palm likes Iowa here to win by 9, 81-72. I think for Richmond, it comes down to the big three that they've been riding. You got Jacob Gilliard. He's 8,200. I mean, he's not going to come off the floor. He's just going to play 40 minutes. You know what you're going to get here. You're going to get assist rate and you're going to get steal rate. He has an elite steal rate. I think he's the all-time leader, I believe, in steals at the NCAA level. So shot rate, I wish it was better. Not only 19%. Man, if he was 25 to 28%. At 8,200, it's almost like, man, can we just jam this guy in? He should be gold for 40 to 45 fantasy points. But because he's so passive and doesn't take as many shots here, ceiling's a little bit limited in some spots. We've seen him have some really big blow-up spots, and you can't always count on, 4 or 5 steals in the game. But if they're going to pull the upset, he's going to have to be a huge part of it. So definitely like Gilliard here. And then an interesting player that they have is Tyler Burton. He's 7,400. Watch this kid play, man. He's silky smooth. 24% shot rate, almost a 30% combined rebounding rate. I mean, I think he's the most interesting option on the team. I mean, we've seen him go for 40-plus fantasy points in a bunch of different spots this year at 7,400. I mean, why would we not want to get some exposure to that? He's kind of an inside-outside big. And we know that Iowa, tends to struggle against teams that, can play inside, and that's what Burton and Golden are.
So I want to go back to Gilliard here for a second. We talked about this in pretty good detail, largely during our upset alert video. For those of you that are watching on YouTube, if you haven't already subscribed to our channel, you'll be able to go back and see all the content that we've been pushing out as we gear up for the kickoff or the tip-off of March Madness. But when we were talking about upsets, we talked about how teams kind of have a propensity to really ratchet up the involvement and the usage of their stars when they're trying to pull an upset. Do you think that maybe with the Spiders being underdogs here, we see them focus a little bit more on Gilliard and kind of get that shot rate into like the low to mid 20s, or am I just completely dancing on narrative street?
No, I mean, they're 10-point dogs, right? I was actually kind of surprised they're 10-point dogs. I don't mind, kind of taking the points here. I still obviously think Iowa's going to win here. But this core three that they have with Gilliard, Burton, and Golden, I mean, pretty solid here. And if you told me right now that his shot rate for this game would be, north of 25%, I would have more shares than what I'm going to right now. Right now, I'm looking at, maybe playing one of these guys in a game stacking environment, maybe 2 to see if, the North Carolina game goes under. Maybe I can get some leverage there. But for the most part, 1 or 2 shares here or there. Grant Golden at 7K. Real interesting, right? I mean, he's the cheapest of these three. He's got double-double upside because Iowa isn't particularly great on the glass. We've seen Iowa like to play small with both Murray brothers. So this is definitely a spot that he could eat, or he could also get run off the floor. So he's more of a large field GPP option. He's super volatile. You wouldn't be surprised if he dropped 12 fantasy points, or you wouldn't be surprised if he had 36. So if you're playing large field, definitely not a bad option.
So we mentioned the Hawkeyes being better than 10-point favorites. A big reason that is the case is none other than Keegan Murray, not quite our price king, but close enough. Want to talk to us a little bit about the big man from Iowa and maybe a few other plays that we want to look at here for this Hawkeyes team?
Yeah, I mean, the kid is special, right? We've seen it all year. I mean, look at the rates, right? 31% shot rate, 30% combined rebounding rate. Can even block some shots here. Currently rated as the second most valuable player in college basketball from Ken Palm. I mean, there's not much else you could say. This price tag doesn't necessarily scare me. The only hesitation is that this slate in particular, it's going to be tough to get the stars in because the value options are a little bit trickier to maneuver around. There's not the huge mispriced guys that we've kind of identified. I know there's some injury news that could potentially come out. We saw, the Michigan news could potentially open up some value, but we'll kind of talk about that later. So something to pay attention to. But at 10-1, if you're playing cash, it's like, man, you got to decide whether you want to lock in Sheboy or Murray. I don't know if you can lock both in just because that's over 20K. But don't mind it here. Obviously, the implied total is 81 points. He's going to have a huge part of this, obviously, with the 31% shot share here. So, 11 of the last 15, 40 fantasy points, right? So in 7 straight, we've just been milking it at 10K. We'll take the 4X at that price point, pretty much all day. And he has 5 to 6X upside even still. So definitely one of the top plays of the slate here. And we don't expect anything less than 40, right?
So for you cash game players out there, first off, it's March Madness, man. Mix it up. Live a little bit. Second off, if you do want to lock in Oscar Tshiebwe and Keegan Murray, you are looking at less than 5K per player on average. So you're really going to have to get creative with the rest of your build if you want to pay up to that extent. With just Keegan Murray in there, it leaves you with an even $5,700. And while you might not stack them together, there is another Hawkeye that's right around that price tag that I think should be at least paid attention to as we round out our build.
Yeah, Tony Perkins, man, 5,700. What are you going to get? What are we going to get here? He's gotten more minutes recently. Kind of the strategy we played all year is you're either going to play Murray or you're not going to play Murray, and then you're just going to move on from the rest of Iowa. We rode that streak when Perkins was the high 3K, 4K, giving us 20 to 25 fantasy points. I don't see him really getting into the 30 fantasy point range, especially with Gilliard and his steal rate, and the turnover upside here could be a little bit much to pay that price tag off. But if you're looking for, a game stacking option with Murray to run back with someone like Tyler Burton, definitely don't mind it. He has the ability to go off. We've seen it before. He's super talented. It's just a question of whether the minutes are going to be there and how many guys is Fran McCaffrey going to run out there.
So it sounds like, actually, as a question, are you looking to stack pieces from this game, or are you just kind of looking at some one-off darts to go with your kind of primary North Carolina stacks?
Yeah, so with what we've been doing with Iowa, it's mainly playing Murray, maybe having a lineup with Perkins, and then running it back. So this is more of a 1-by-1 situation. Or if you're playing, 1 out of 50, don't mind putting a Perkins with Murray, or if you think the upset could happen, throwing a Grant Golden with a Gilliard. The previous game is a little more stackable. You got, some interesting pieces that you can kind of throw in there. This one is a little more, a little more cut and dry, essentially. And you probably don't want to get, even though the total is crazy, with the pricing, you're paying a pretty penny for these guys. So building out the rest of your lineup by trying to stack this game is going to be pretty tough. So we just got to be smart about our builds and just try to figure out, how we're going to make this all work, and making sure we don't go too crazy on the Iowa side, because how many times have we been burned this year on getting, playing, early in the season, man, playing 2 to 3 of these guys. And when you see 150 point total, was like the most frustrating thing you've ever seen when Keegan Murray has 50 fantasy points and the next guy has like 17. That's ridiculous.
Except for that one game where Perkins put up 43 and his price literally hasn't gone down since.
Yeah, exactly. What a game. I had him that night. That was a nice night. I think I won $200 that night.
But don't chase.
No, yeah, definitely don't chase.
So we talked about pricing being a little bit difficult in this second game that we just finished breaking down. The last game we're going to talk about is actually kind of the opposite. Pretty solid total, 148.5 for the number 4 Providence team facing off against one of our Cinderellas. We've actually got them going to the Sweet 16 in the bracket that we broke down a few nights ago. Number 13, South Dakota State Jackrabbits. Close game, 2.5 point spread. Should be really fast paced, and it feels like the pricing is pretty reasonable, right? You can certainly use a few guys from this game in particular to maybe get off of a more expensive option to pivot off of some chalk. So why don't you start with your beloved Jackrabbits?
I'm gonna go completely broke on this game tomorrow. I can just feel it. Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting game. I didn't quite expect this total to come in at 148.5. I mean, Providence, doesn't typically they're one of the slower teams. But South Dakota State just, 59th in tempo here. Providence is 273rd. This game could go under, so be very careful on this one. Providence, imposes their will, and they're two bigs. They could really slow this game down, but I just look at it from a perspective where Providence is going to need to score to keep up with these guys. These guys are going to be jacking up 32, 33-foot three-pointers. We've talked about it all week. Number one in three-point percentage, 44%. Even if you hold them down, that might just mean 38 to 40%, which is still better than a lot of teams, 250 teams out there. So obviously their effective field goal rate, number one. They don't turn the ball over. They make their free throws. When you look at it from a DFS perspective, man, they really just play five guys, right? So it's determining what we're going to do with these five guys. My guy is Baylor Shireman. He's 7,600, can do everything, man. This guy's so much fun to watch. 16 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. Can chip in a steal or two here. Nice rates, the shot rates there. Obviously, the assist rates there. There's a pretty massive tournament upside here at 7,600. If you think this game gets close to the 148 and goes over, definitely someone that you're probably gonna want to have in. For me, he's been over 35 fantasy points in 9 of the last 15 games, so that's something that gives him a really nice floor here, even in a tougher matchup. So he's definitely someone that I'm going to have some pretty good exposure to.
So kind of scrolling further down this starting five for the Jackrabbits, they have a slew of guys that are right there in play in that kind of 4K range, 4 to 5K range. So why don't you spend a little time with some of these kind of value options for South Dakota State? Let us know if there's maybe one or two that stand out above the others.
Yeah, so last game, all these guys basically played 30 to 35 minutes. So you know what you're going to get with the starters here. Not a huge rotation coming down here in the conference tournament. We expect that to keep going as we enter the NCAA tournament and them trying to obviously advance. You look at it here. Alex Arians, he's 4,900. He's the lead guard here. Man, he's just got such a low floor, but there's a ceiling here, right? At 4,900, you could see him getting 20 to 20 fantasy points. He hasn't done it often, but he's in play because he could be on the floor for 35 minutes, right? So definitely not the safest play. I'll have him a share or two in a large field as a game stack. You look at someone like Zeke Mayo. Kind of the same thing here. I mean, super high volatility, but just, playing a lot of minutes, right? 4,100. I mean, there's not a lot of guys, right, as we look at the slate that are going to be playing 30 minutes at this price point. Usually occurs on these slates due to a misprice or there's an injury that we just lock these guys in for 30 minutes. But, a lot of the teams look pretty healthy here. So, one thing that we didn't really mention at all this week is that a lot of these teams have been off for quite some time. I mean, obviously Selection Sunday, there were some games, and Saturday was a huge slate. But before that, some of these mid-majors wrapped up, well in advance. So not a lot of huge injury news to follow right now. So that's why I like some of these options down here. My favorite is easily. See what I did here, is going to be Easley. He's the cheapest of the bunch. He's 4K. He actually has decent rates for this price point. He's got 5 to 7x upside. He's been over 20 fantasy points in 4 of the last 7. I would gladly take 5x right here and 20 fantasy points at 4K to jam in some of these studs. So that's who I'm kind of looking at to pair with a Shireman or maybe a Douglas Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, from a salary relief standpoint, you're going to need it, right? And it is going to be, unless there is some, very much so out of left field injury news, you're not going to find guys that are going to see this much run at this price tag, right? All three of these guys are below your average salary if you jam in the 2 Price Kings. Probably shouldn't do that in general, but point persists, you're going to need this salary relief. So definitely want to take a close look at this guard rotation for the Jackrabbits. Moving over to the 4 seed, to the Friars. Not quite as bottom barrel from a pricing standpoint, but some pretty reasonably priced guys here. Who do you want to start off with for the Friars?
Yeah, absolutely, right? For KenPom having them projected to score 77 points, That's not typically the games we find them playing in. Usually find them playing in the 65 to 68 range. So definitely some upside here at their prices, man. It's going to be really tough not to lock in Jared Bynum tomorrow. 6,800, just a stud, man. 26% shot rate, 33% assist rate here. I mean, it's this huge upside in the spot when he's getting paced up here. Since February, I mean, he's just been going bananas here. We saw him put 47 fantasy points on Villanova, 44 on Xavier, 45 in DePaul, and then had the massive game against Georgetown where he was just shooting like fadeaway threes from like 30 feet away. It was pretty impressive here. So definitely a great tournament option, definitely a nice cash game option. I see profile as well. One thing that we kind of maybe buried the lead on, obviously now talking about Providence's side, is the Jackrabbits a big weakness here? Defensive efficiency, right? They're 223rd in that, and they're 269th in opponent 3-point percentage. So this is why the total is higher, is because they shoot the three ball really well, and they give up the three ball. So you're just going to see that bonus point, really ratcheted up in this game, which is why this is one of my favorite games to target. Now, like I said, we have to be careful here, and that's why I'm going to have lineups that go one by one, or we have some lineups that I even maybe go 2x2 or 3x2 in this one. So the range of outcomes in this game is probably going to determine the entire slate, to be honest with you. Another guy that's super interesting is Nate Watson, 6,300. Man, he should just have such an advantage on the inside. The rebounding rate for a big man, the 21%, it's just, he should be putting up doubles, right? I mean, the shot rate's there. He profiles to 30 to 35 in this spot. We just don't know if he's going to be that guy in the middle to impose his will, or he's just going to be another guy on the court. So he's someone in large field that I'm interested in, and don't mind him pairing with Bynum with maybe a Shireman on the other side.
So you mentioned the soft spot that these Jackrabbits present as an opponent to 3-point shooters. Any other guys here for the Friars that you think can really take advantage of that and fill it up a few times from behind the arc?
Yeah, so Al Durham here, he's 5,500, 21% shot rate, decent 3-point shooter here. More of a cash game play, but he's coming off 31 fantasy points in the last tournament game here. Other than that, he hasn't really been in that 30-point range for much of the season, though, but don't mind large field taking a shot here. But Noah Horkler is a really interesting option, 6,500. I mean, I was playing this guy in large field at 7,500. The shot rate, not great, but he can rebound. He can block some shots and grab some steals. He's a good passer. We've seen 5 to 6x upside. Now, a lot of these guys like Watson and Horkler are going to be, I'm not jamming them into cash lineups by any means, even though the implied total is really nice. That's going to be for Bynum. But for pairing with Bynum in tournaments, I don't mind taking a shot at either Horkler or Watson.
Yeah, a lot to like about the Friars side specifically in that matchup, right? So certainly in favor of having my fair share of Friars and of Jackrabbits. Specifically speaking to the Friars, most of them are right in that kind of mid-tier of price that generally is overlooked. So not only are they getting the boost of the benefit from this matchup, but they're going to be pretty assuredly under-owned. So a lot to like with both of these teams. As we move on to the first question, I always ask you when we're going through our builds, I think I know a couple of these names, but are there any other guys that we should consider as just lock button dudes? Get them in our lineups first and build around them as we complete the rest of our roster.
Yeah, so there's 4 guys that I'm really consider just locking in. Not necessarily all in one lineup's going to be pretty tough, obviously, when 2 of these guys are over 10K, but or close to 10K. Baycott, he's 9,500. Keegan Murray, I mean, he's 10-1. I like Baycott a little bit more, obviously, with the savings and the profile of his game. But Oscar Sheboy, right? Poor St. Peter's. Massive year this year. I mean, 55%.
They're about to get worked.
Right? Yeah, they're not going to be excited to see this guy walk through the tunnel here. They are 295th in average height. They're 21st, and they have a 21% turnover rate, and they're almost dead last in allowing opponents to block their shot at 352nd. So, I think he's going to have a pretty good game here. Definitely should profile to. And the thing about Cal is he's not afraid to just leave him out there no matter what the score is. So coming off of that last game, we were talking off air that he was a little heated. So you can see Sheboy working into form here and getting a 50-50 burger here and just kind of moving on. We talked about Bynum from Providence, but another guy here, man. So Anton Watson at 4,000 against Georgia State, Gonzaga big here. So he's the backup big to Timian Holmgren. There's been plenty of times this year that I've been on him and off of him, and he's really hurt me just based on some of these games that Gonzaga plays where the blowout is in place, and he's just in there absolutely dominating. For this price point at 25 fantasy points. Georgia State, they're 344th in effective field goal percentage. There's going to be a lot of misses here and a lot of rebounds for these guys to collect, and the blowout minutes are there, right? You're not going to probably see Timian Holmgren out there, with 5-6 minutes to go in a complete blowout, and by that time Watson will have already most likely gotten his couple of rotations in the first half and then one in the second half. So you can see him really just kind of rounding out and having a nice game. He's a good passer. He's a great rebounder and can do a little bit of scoring. So definitely someone that I'm looking at to get locked in here.
Yeah, and, for Gonzaga specifically, I mean, they're pretty consistent, right? Like once they get into that comfortable spot, they'll pull all of their starting rotation for a good number of minutes, right? So you look at this game in particular, obviously they are a 1 seed, so they are heavy favorites here in the first round. So wouldn't be surprising at all to see this value piece get some extended run, 5, 6, maybe even 7 or 8 minutes consecutively to close out the game. So a lot to like there, and the cost savings obviously doesn't hurt. On the other side of our locks, it's time to get faded. And we've got two guys here that we're fading for kind of two distinctly different reasons. Why don't you tell us about the first one, Mike?
Yeah, so can I say your boy, TJD here, Trace Jackson Davis, 9,000.
I don't know him.
Really broke your heart, man, if about a month ago, so you haven't recovered yet. But for me, I mean, he's 9,000 against St. Mary's. I mean, this is an absolute ugly matchup, right? 126-point total. St. Mary's 9th in defensive efficiency. They're 4th in keeping opponents off the offensive glass. There's not going to be a ton of easy putbacks. You got Matthias Tass in the middle there. So definitely don't play the strengths here of TJD. Just don't like his tournament upside, right? Now we've seen TJD in plenty of games that were in the, Indiana's typically playing in the 120s and the 130s. So we've seen plenty of games where he's gotten to, 35 fantasy points. But if I'm paying $9K for him in a tournament, I need 40 plus. I need him to challenge whatever Baycott's going to get to get that $500 savings and make it work somewhere else. So definitely someone I'm looking to fade. And the other guy here is Ryan Hawkins. Man, we were playing a ton of him, right? Price has fallen here to 7,100. He's the forward from Creighton, and he gets the absolute ugliest matchup, I feel, of the entire, maybe even the entire first round, honestly. San Diego State here, they're number 2 in defensive efficiency, and they just play some of the nastiest games you will ever see. Not a lot of fun there. He's only been over 30 fantasy points in one game in the last 7, so it's not like he's in great form here. So I'm not going to have – I may fire one bullet just so it doesn't absolutely burn me, but for the most part, I'm just looking to get away from him and most of the Creighton pieces, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, that matchup in particular, right? We talk about a couple of games here that are north of or around 150 total. That game total is south of 120 points, right? It's going to be an absolute dogfight. Going to be very ugly. Certainly makes sense that we are not looking to get very many of those pieces in, if any, even though Hawkins does have a bit of a discount. So definitely agree with looking elsewhere with regard to those two particular pieces. The last thing I want to talk about as we close out here is something that is going to be a necessary evil, right? Pricing is pretty tough tomorrow unless we have some news coming our way. So we're going to have to find some value pieces. Where are you going to save some money tomorrow, Mike?
So my strategy when it comes to tournament time, and this is typically how it is in the tournament time, the pricing is right. We've got enough a full year's worth of data. We know who these guys are for the most part. And if there's not a slew of injuries here, then There's not a lot of options that are just clear cut. So for me, I typically like to look at the 1 through 3 seeds that are on that slate. And I look at the guys that are lower priced, but only because they could either come off the bench, they're sixth man, or they're a kind of a role player getting 20 to 25 minutes in these games where they're profiled to win by in some cases like Baylor's projected win by 21 here, Gonzaga by 23 and probably more. So you look at Kentucky 17.5, but they may push 20. So a lot of these pieces here are going to be decent options here. So you look at some of these guys that we're talking about. We already talked about Watson from Gonzaga. You got Remy Martin, 4,400. I mean, they're starting to ramp him up. They kind of played him safe as he was working through his injury. I think he's going to be a little bit popular here at 4,400, 30 fantasy points in the last game. Helped me win 5K the other day. So I'm definitely going to be clicking his name a few times. But he got up to 26 minutes. I could see him, Bill Self getting him to that 22 to 24 minutes, when the game gets out of hand, coming out and saving him for the rest of the tournament. But in those minutes, I mean, the guy was an absolute stud for fantasy for the last few years before the injuries have really kind of derailed him this year. So someone I'm looking to get in there. And then also kind of sticking along the same path, Dale Bonner, 3,600. LJ Cryer's out again. You got Akinjo and Flagler. And someone's going to have to spell one of them and then kind of help facilitate the offense and then also be there in the blowout. He had 23 fantasy points in the last game, so he can definitely at 3,600 get it done. Davion Mintz can come off the bench for Kentucky and really score here. He's only 3,500. We've seen him live in the 20 fantasy point range a few times. And then, outside of that, just kind of looking at, like what's an ugly team that's getting a pace boost, right? And you look at someone like Max Rice for Boise State. Memphis wants to play fast, but they like to play fast and ugly. Boise State loves to slow the game down and likes to play really good defense. Hey, there's some turnovers to be had. Could pick off a steal or two here, get a little bit of scoring for you with the, up tempo on his side. So definitely looking at Max Rice for some lineups, getting the 20 to 25 minutes here, being, someone that can, really, really put it in the basket for them and potentially get us 20 fantasy points.
Yeah. So all of these guys, more specifically Martin and Bonner are going to be some of the more popular, some of the chalkier plays on the board. I mean, do you just kind of look at that as a necessary evil and take the cost savings and get different elsewhere? Or does that maybe slow you down just a hair?
Yeah, no, you're going to have to you're going to have to play some of these guys in order to be able to do the different things that you're going to want to do. Because the first thing, what you're going to do is you're going to pull up the slate on your phone or on your computer. And who's the first guy you're going to want to click is either Sheboy or Murray up at the top. You're going to want to play Baycott. And next thing you know, you don't have any money. So these guys are a necessary evil, not only one, because they're in good spots, but two, just the price savings, right? I mean, I'll take Remy Martin at 4,400 all day if you told me he's going to get 25 minutes. Same thing with Bonner, and I would take some shots to be a little more contrarian with Mintz. And then just kind of working through the injury news. So, our guy Devontae Jones here for Michigan ruled out. I don't know what's going to really happen here with Michigan, right? They got Frankie Collins. They don't really want to play him a lot of minutes. If he gets 20, 25 minutes, his rates are okay. He's pretty cheap here. I forget exactly how much he costs, but he's obviously a dumpster dive here. I think we have him at 3,200. I guess you could take a shot there. Just looking for more news as we get closer. Who's going to be in the starting lineup? But I think with that injury, you have to look at the usage going to like a Caleb Houston or like Diabate. Like those guys are probably just going to take on more of the load, where he's going to be more of someone that's just kind of maybe in the corner and doing a little bit of bringing up the ball at the court, but they're going to really play through Dickinson against Colorado State. So just kind of working through these things as we get closer to the lock. Seeing if there's any more news that's going to come out, seeing if there's any changes, right? Like if someone's going to get different and change up their starting lineup, that could be interesting. So there's just a bunch of things to kind of watch for as we get close to lock. But for the most part, I think we pretty much know what we're going to get tomorrow, and it's just how we attack the slate is going to be the main difference here.
Yeah, and one of the things to watch for is getting yourself over to drroto.com, getting subscribed and getting into our Discord. As that news breaks, as you are setting your final lineups, as you're finishing your last minute 5th or 9th or 40th bracket, we got you covered in that CBB channel. That thing is easily the most active in the entire community there. We're printing out winners every single night. So if you're not already subscribed, get over to drroto.com, get yourself signed up, get into Discord, and let's get this bread.
Thanks for stopping by the office. Get your fantasy prescription by subscribing to the channel and checking out drroto.com. And until the next visit,